And welcome back to House Call. Your host, Tony House, right here on the nextsportstar.com network. Over 3 million members. Join up absolutely free. We've got outstanding programming, shows right from 7 o'clock in the morning right until midnight. Obviously, great hosts and, of course, great guests. I've got one here with me, Ottawa, each and every morning, 9 to 10. And I've got somebody who's going to do, we hope, some great things in Ottawa in the years to come. The newly hired GM of the Ottawa CFL franchise, name to be determined. Marcel Desjardins joins me. Marcel, thanks for taking the time.
Hey, Tony, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. And maybe just acquaint yourself with the viewers and listeners. Just talk about, again, growing up, the sports you played, maybe some sports heroes, your early mentors growing up.
Well, I grew up in Southern Ontario, and my earliest recollection of CFL football is the '76 Grey Cup, and growing up in Burlington, with Tony Gabriel playing in Ottawa, that was kind of my initial catch on with Rough Riders back in the day. So I would trek over to Iverwin and Hamilton somewhat regularly to go catch games at Iverwin. So Tony was obviously one of my early sports heroes. Had a bunch of them obviously on that team. Also grew up a big fan of the Montreal Expos and Montreal Canadiens. And if people can remember the Toronto Blizzard NASL team.
Yes.
So, the range of sports that I followed and obviously players that I enjoyed watching.
And that's great. And obviously at Ottawa, I remember that very vividly. You also referenced the Pat Stokwa swing pass. So you've got some love for the Ottawa Rough Riders back in the glory days. And we'll get to the recent hire and congratulations. Take us through it. Obviously, the next logical step in your career was taking over and being a GM, a director of football operations. But you go through the interview process. Jeff Hunt has to sell you on you have to sell him on you. Jeff has to obviously sell you on the job. What was the appeal to this?
Well, first and foremost, it's just the opportunity to be a GM again in the CFL. I had a brief opportunity in Hamilton, but that wasn't really something that worked out for a number of reasons, and I'm not going to get into those details. But at the end of the day, I've been in this league. This will be my 20th season in the CFL. So I know, I've pretty much been exposed to and seen everything, whether it be, the good side of things from what I've done in Montreal, versus, the things in Hamilton that may not have gone so well. But at the end of the day, you put them all together, it's all experience. And, so the first thing is just being able to, do that job again. The second part of it is, being able to build a franchise from the ground up, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of hiring people, in terms of, instilling your vision, your philosophy in everything that's going to be happening on the football side.
Yeah, no, and taking on the expansion team role. Obviously, this isn't an established franchise, so that has to be a challenge, which I'm sure you're striving to get going on. What are going to be some of the early challenges?
Well, we're going to do a lot of due diligence relative to lining up all our ducks and scouting players, whether it be Canadian players for this year's draft, even though we're only participating relative to selecting juniors. And then obviously getting ready for the CFL season, and we'll do our due diligence in terms of scouting CFL teams and players. And then, from there, doing NFL camps. CIS will start in September. So all of those elements, relative to scouting and building basically a roster of players that you would like to go to, even though, in the different categories, you may not have options on all of them, at least prioritizing those players so as they are available, you know who you want to go to.
Yeah, and obviously you've got a 4-year contract, so and hopefully longer, of course. But what's the blueprint? Maybe short term, long term within those 4 years, and what do you see as sort of the ingredients to bringing back that Grey Cup in let's say a 4-year plan?
Well, it's going to come down to building, the strongest roster possible, with the limitations that we have. So the expansion draft is going to allow us to do some things, but it's not a perfect draft. I don't think any GM GM in this position would say that they love it, because you're always going to want it to be better. Having said that, I mean, we are going to be able to acquire some good players through that draft. We're going to have to sign free agents to get 24 players out of the expansion draft, and you go to camp with 75 to 80. So there's a lot of players that are going to have to be signed as free agents. And that's going to be a big part of just getting the team on the ground initially. As I said in my press conference, I mean, the quarterback and your Canadian content are going to be, two of your main ingredients in building a successful team on the field. But it also extends to, obviously, your coaching staff and the people that you bring in at that level. And then the people who are doing all the groundwork in terms of the personnel and evaluating the players. So, in terms of expectations, I mean, obviously the first season's not going to be, necessarily a great season record-wise, but I want to make sure that the team that's on the field is one that's competitive and is exciting to watch, and shows that energy that they're competing all the time, despite where we're at with the game or within a season. And then you move forward to the following year, and then you're going to reap some of the benefits of your regular draft, probably a little bit more. And that will transcend into, again, more free agents. And our intent, obviously, long-term is not to get caught into or locked into trying to sign free agents all the time. But as an expansion team, initially, you don't really have a choice, because, again, you do have to, get up to that 75 number in terms of players you can sign, and you're only going to be able to get, 24 as your expansion team. So, and then it comes the third year, I mean, I think, we really need to try to shoot for, a competitive playoff spot. And once you're in there, you don't know what you're capable of doing, depending on what type of streak you're on. And, I mean, I go back to the 5-11 Rough Riders in '81. Obviously, we'd want to have a better record than that. But, if you get into the playoffs, you can make things happen at times. And if we can, be challenging for a Grey Cup berth, once you're in that game, anything can happen again. So, our expectation level is high. But we have to also balance that with a little bit of reality.
Of course. Look at the schedule right now. As far as, I guess, the biggest job you'll have is in search of a coach. What's the timetable there, and what are you looking for in a coach?
Well, the timetable is such that I believe our best options in terms of quantity and quality will be after the CFL season expires. So, late November, early December, maybe into January is when, I think our final decision will be made on that front. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't, go in a different direction in terms of the timing if I felt that ideal candidate was out there right now. But at the same time, I think, I owe it to the franchise to make sure we wait for all of those options to play out, because you don't know what's going to happen across the CFL a year from now. In terms of who may or may not be available to be spoken to. So that's really the timing of it. In terms of the type of person, I mean, we need to have somebody with CFL experience. Doesn't mean they have to have experience in that role, but it has to have somebody, it has to be somebody who's had exposure to the CFL game. And I mean, not just for a season or two, but somebody who really knows the intricacies of this league relative to all of the rules and, how you need to build your program and how you need to prepare, on a weekly basis, and what your limitations are there based on the collective agreement. All those things. I don't want to have to be in a position to have to educate that person on a daily basis. I want somebody who already knows, those intricacies.
And obviously been around a lot of great football guys. And what are you going to take most from your experiences with, like you mentioned, the good and the bad, but what are you going to take on as far as a guy like Jim Popp? What did you learn from him that you're going to basically implement with going forward in this position?
Well, I mean, if there's one thing I would say is to don't assume anything. Meaning, if there's a player you have interest in at another team, and even if he's an all-star, I mean, I would think most people probably would assume that guy's not going to be available, if you wanted to trade for him. But you need to make that call anyway. And you'd be surprised sometimes, what's going on at other teams. And they may be in a position to need to do something, either because they've had injuries on other positions and they need to fill a void, otherwise because of the cap issue. I mean, there's a million reasons why somebody may want to do something. But if there's one thing, it's just be proactive and think outside the box a little bit, and don't make assumptions. Just make the calls, do your due diligence, and cover all the bases, and try to do it in a way that's not reactionary, but more proactive in your approach.
On the line with Marcel Desjardins, the GM of the Ottawa CFL franchise, the Ottawa. Any preference to the name?
Well, I had an interview last week, and they kind of threw that one at me, and I just said, well, for the interim, we'll just be the Ottawa Desjardins.
Yeah, hey, that's it.
So let's just stick with that one on the intro.
Yeah, no, exactly. And as I said, I think we're it's exciting times no matter what. And I feel for Jeff Hunt because I think you're in a lose-lose situation. No, it's not. It can't be the Rough Riders, and I think that's come and gone. And then obviously we've seen some pretty bad football. And then name-wise, I think whatever it is, as long as Marcel Desjardins puts a winning product out, I think it's just going to grow on us. So what do you think?
That's exactly right. That's what it has to come down to. The performance of the team will dictate how the name is perceived and not the other way around.
Yeah, no, exactly. So looking at your personnel, you talked about, hitting, all the combines, you've got the expansion draft, which is pretty, it sort of suits and favors the team. But as I mentioned, your expectations are to field a competitive team and hopefully by year 4, at least contend, because as you mentioned, that 5-11, all you have to do is make the playoffs. You look at any sports, you just get hot and great things can happen.
That's right. And again, we would hope to be competitive, game by game, but in terms of the record, those are two separate things. So come year 2, I would think we would be more competitive. And then year 3, as we're able to, formulate our roster and manage that a little bit better with, other people from across the league, draft picks over the years, whatever, we're certainly going to be in a better position to, ideally have a 500 team at the least in that third year on the field.
And what are you doing these days as far as you moving? When are you moving up to Ottawa, and is that in the works? And what's your day-to-day these days?
Well, right now I'm going to continue my responsibilities in Montreal through till the middle of February, because obviously there's a state of flux here a little bit relative to the head coaching search, relative to finding people to replace me. So Jim Pop and I spoke, and right now, he needs me to be here to try to help transition everything out of, everything that I do to other people. So then come mid-February, I'll be in Ottawa, and, I'll slowly but surely get settled in there and transition out of Montreal on a personal level as well.
Well, I must have been pretty excited about your cohort, Mark Trestman, moving on to the NFL. Is he going to be the real deal down there?
Yeah, Mark is just so meticulous in everything he does, and he leaves no stone unturned.
So I guess
Mark is a tremendous organizer. Quarterbacks are obviously his greatest strength in terms of how to get the most out of them, and they obviously have a good team. They won 10 games last year. So Mark needs to, and I'm sure he will, get the most out of Jay Cutler and be able to, get that team into the playoffs. And I have complete confidence in Mark and his ability to do that.
Well, really appreciate the time. Just before I let you go, I run a house call hot seat for my first-time guests. You ready to have some fun?
Sure.
Your favorite cartoon growing up?
Wow. I don't know. Bugs Bunny.
Best football movie ever?
Longest year.
Someone in football that you admire?
Someone in football?
Yes.
Jim Bob.
Best advice you ever received, and who gave it to you?
That's a tough one. I don't know off the top of my head on that one.
All right. Best football player ever?
Best football player ever. I'll throw Ben Cahoon's name out there.
Okay. Someone you'd love to meet in history, past or present?
Past would be Winston Churchill.
Mm-hmm. That's good. No, I think that he'd be very interesting. And I know you're a young guy. The number one thing on your bucket list, if you have one going?
Wow. I don't know. Just continue to travel the world.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I really appreciate your time, Marcel. We'll circle back and let's bring that Grey Cup home to Ottawa sooner than later.
All right, Tony, I appreciate your time.
Take care.